Okay, thank you, Lynn, for this nice introduction. Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, ladies and gentlemen, something is not right with this. Pull it out. Is this okay? Yeah, now it works. It is a great pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon, this noon here in Reading, and I want to say thank you to Lynn Brown and Solomon Lausch for inviting me to come here to be with you. And I have to admit I'm really impressed as well by the number of people who are here and the ages of people who are here. That's great to see such a great and big crowd interested in the transatlantic relationship. And I have to tell you, that's something I enjoy most, leaving New York City, where my office is, where my residence is, traveling the district, Lynn mentioned the district of my consulate, and meeting the people who live in the region, meeting you and talking to you and talking with you. And that is actually exactly what I understand as my duty as Consul General in New York. Before I get into the topic, I might maybe explain a little bit what the Consul General is doing. I'm often asked, what are you? Are you a little ambassador? Are you a branch office of the embassy? And I don't know. You know, we have ambassadors in all the states around the world, of course one in Washington as well, who deals with the national and bilateral issues. And then in bigger countries, in countries which are very important for us in Germany as partners, countries where many Germans live and countries where many people travel to Germany or to Europe, we have several consulate generals who serve a certain region. In America, those are 8. That's the biggest number worldwide. We have one in New York, obviously, in Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, Houston, I think that's it, Atlanta. So when I'm asked, what are you doing as a Consul General, what does your team does, then I try to explain it in 3 steps. First and foremost, we serve the German community here in our region, mainly in issuing passports for those who live here and who are German citizens, often double citizenship, Americans and Germans, when they live here already for a longer time. And that's about 6,000 passports per year. 6,000 passports, if you have to renew your passport every 10 years, that's then it expires. So about 60,000 Germans who live in this region who have a German passport and want a new one, plus maybe another 60,000 who don't live here in the region for more than 10 years or who don't need their German passport, etc. So we count about 120,000 Germans living in our region, looking for service, but mostly they want to be left alone and live their life in this region. And these consulate services include also the issuing of visa, about also 6,000 visa we issue in our office, mostly for people who are not Americans. Americans don't need a visa to travel to Europe. They don't even need a visa to start to work in Europe. If they want to work there for a longer time, they have to apply for a visa, but that they can do in Europe. Now it's mostly people from third states, Chinese, Bangladeshis who live here in the United States, who study here and who want to go to Europe, to Germany, to study there, to travel, whatever. That's the part of our consulate which I describe as the consulate services. And then there are 2 more tasks which are very important. And I try to explain them as follows: explaining Germany and understanding the United States. That's our job. And maybe you can help us. So this means being in a dialogue with people, bringing our countries together. Explaining Germany, we call it public diplomacy. That's what I do today. And that's what we do, me and my colleagues in schools and universities, in societies when we travel around. And understanding the United States is also very important, not only for us who live here for 3, 4, 5 years, but also for those who are responsible for foreign policy in Berlin, and they rely on what we tell them, how this country functions, how policies are developed, who are the important people. And we have also to explain to them that Washington alone is not the United States, and New York alone is not the United States. This country is much more colorful. I don't have to explain it to you. So these are the 3 main tasks we are privileged to fulfill, me and my team in the Consulate General in New York. And for this reason, it is great to be here in Pennsylvania, a state of a strong German heritage. Germans formed the state, they settled here, they founded towns and cities, they created wealth, and they influenced the culture of this great state. You can find German heritage all over. In Reading this afternoon I will see some treasures, I guess, as well. I've been to other towns and cities. I've been the other months to Bethlehem in Pennsylvania, founded by Germans in 1741. Actually, Germans who came from my little hometown in the east of Saxony. You might know the church which settled Bethlehem is the Moravian Church, and the Moravian Church has Moravian roots, but was founded in Saxony, the little town where I grew up. So even though when I lived behind the Iron Curtains, I had connections to Bethlehem, even though I never would have had a chance to go there, because this Iron Curtain was very close for those who lived on the eastern side of this Iron Curtain. So Pennsylvania could be, and maybe is, on the forefront for the relationships between our countries. There's a partnership between Pennsylvania and one of the 16 German states, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, and there are many sister cities between Pennsylvanian towns and cities and German cities and towns. I was asked to speak about the transatlantic relationship today, and that's necessary, I guess, particularly in times where obviously something is shifting. And when there's something shifting in these relationships, it is important that we stay in contact and in a dialogue between our countries, between our continents, and that's why I want to thank the World Affairs Council here in Greater Reading to maintain this dialogue today, but also at other occasions. When we speak about the transatlantic relationship in general and the German-American relationship in special, of course we have to speak about the past, because it is our common history of the last 75 years which shaped this very unique relationship between the US and Europe, and between the USA and Germany in special. If we look back, it is indeed incredible development. After the greatest catastrophe of mankind, the Second World War and the Holocaust, it is somehow a miracle that the Americans were willing to reach out for reconciliation, and not only to reach out for reconciliation, but also to help Germany and the Germans to rebuild and newly build a devastated country. And I think this foundation of this relationship even is important in our days, and it's a driving force for its strength up to today. We Germans owe the Americans so much. The Americans enabled us to become an anchor state of the Western world. The way Americans taught the Germans after the World War the values of democracy, the rule of law, and also freedom. And if you want, also our Constitution, which just celebrated its 70th anniversary, is one of the results of these teachings you gave us Germans. And this Constitution starts with the remarkable article, "Human dignity shall be inviolable." The Americans also protected the Germans in a very special time of the East-Western conflict, at least a part of Germany, where the Americans had an opportunity to protect the Germans and the German democracy and freedom. And this was, and in retrospect, is still extremely important. It gave the Germans in the western part of Germany a sense of belonging, and it also was the reason of many personal ties. Millions of Americans came to Germany, servicemen and their families, and they have fond memories, and they have friendships to Germany, and this personal tie still is a very important part of this relationship between our countries. So, obviously, when we talk about transatlantic relationship, when we talk about American-German relationship, then we are not limited to economic ties. Our relationships are about democracy, about the rule of law, about human rights and human dignity, and about freedom in all its colors we, the people, enjoy. It is indeed this very special foundation and shared values of the bonds between our countries that makes this relationship for me personally so important. And you might imagine why it is like this. Lynn told you about my life, and that I didn't enjoy freedom and democracy the whole of my life. I was 23 when the wall came down, and I know exactly how it feels when you are deprived of freedom, of democracy, of the rule of law, just for the reason that you are not obeyed to the rulers of the country. And that's why I think our relationship is more than standing up for democracy and the rule of law in our countries. It is also a kind of responsibility of our countries in the world to defend and foster those values we enjoy and who are important for us. And I'm very happy that the United States and the relationship to the United States played always a role in my life, even in times when there was a big wall between our countries. I told you about the Moravians, which was very important for us in East Germany, that people were willing to travel to the communist country to visit friends, sisters and brothers, and give them the feeling that they are not alone behind the wall. And so this shaped also my view of America. I had the great privilege to see a lot of America soon after the wall came down. I was invited to come here by certain transatlantic organizations. One of them is a partner also of the World Affairs Council, the American Council on Germany. They took me in '91 to see a lot of this wonderful country. And I was also privileged to study in Philadelphia for 1 year with a grant from Germany. So this shaped my view of this wonderful country, and it also showed me that, yeah, what I said before, that we have to defend something which is called freedom. And even in the time when I served the president of Germany, my friend from the times of peaceful revolution, Joachim Gauck, was the time from 2012 to 2017. We came to the United States, we came to Philadelphia to see the history and this great legacy of freedom and independence. We went to the Oval Office to meet Obama, and this was for the president, Joachim Gauck, who also came from East Germany. He was a Protestant minister. Very, very, very special moment. And he was a person who was very convincing when he talked about democracy and the rule of law, because he had experienced 50 years under oppression in East Germany. And particularly this time convinced me then that it is important and also convincing to others when we as the Western countries stay together and tell the others what it means for society to live as equals and as free people. So let's talk about transatlantic relations. To be honest, these relationships have seen better times. There are some challenges and some differences, but we are still very strong partners, and that's good. First of all, relationships live not only by the relationship between organizations and institutions, people shape these relationships. And there's some shift over the last years. It was very clear that politicians in Germany and in the United States, in Berlin or Bonn before and Washington, had a sense of the importance of the transatlantic relationship. Always there was a great number of officials in the administration as well as at the Capitol, in the House and in the Senate, who had own experiences of being in Europe, living in the United States. There were friendships, there were people all over who valued these special relationships. And that has changed over the last years, not only in the time of President Trump, but even before. There were several reasons. The world and the foreign policies became somehow more complex. There was more interest in Asia than it was before. And of course the East-West conflict was over. And we thought it would be okay to look in other directions. And we also thought that the transatlantic relationship is just given. So, and now we realize now we have to work on this. And it's important in this new world order that we reinvent this transatlantic relationship, that we see what are our values, what do we have to defend, and what is on stake. That are the personal ties. But of course, there are also differences. And first of all, since the administration of President Trump, we see obviously a different approach to foreign policy. President Trump and also Secretary Pompeo follow their policy of America first, which is understandable, but this is putting the national interest in focus and making this sometimes to the only focus of foreign policy. They obviously follow a unilateral agenda, and this is very different from the approach the German policy takes. The German foreign minister or the chancellor advocate clearly for multilateral cooperation and multilateral solution finding. Germany heavily invests in international collaboration, in free trade and open borders as much as possible. In the moment, Germany is a member of the Security Council of the United Nations. In the building where the Consulate General has its offices, there's also the permanent representation to the United States and to the United Nations. And we try to invest in this international organization. We try to invest in the development of humanitarian help. We try to invest in the advancement of peace missions and also in the advancement of women's rights. The Chancellor in Davos in January said, talking about foreign policy, we need to factor in the interest of others when defining our own national interest. And she said as well, global architecture can only work when all are ready to compromise. And I think this is a quite different approach to foreign policy than the current administration in Washington has. As I mentioned, that's a development which didn't start solely with the administration of Trump, but now it accelerated in a way. Yes, there are other obvious disagreements. There's the disagreement on Iran. Germans and Europeans want to keep Iran in the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, because they are convinced that this is the only way to prevent Iran from resuming its nuclear program. Nothing more and nothing less. Of course, we know that Iran is a difficult partner, to say it nicely. It is a country which harms a whole region, we know that, but our goal was to prevent Iran from resuming its nuclear program. The American view is that Iran's destructive and dangerous behavior in the region, the missile program and the sunset clauses are much greater risks. And that's why they withdrew from the agreement. And they expect that the Europeans follow this view. But we have another one. Second disagreement. The NATO. There's no disagreement about the NATO, even though in the beginning there were some signs from Trump that he could think differently about the NATO. But we are committed. The Americans are committed, the Europeans are committed, the members of the NATO see them in a very important alliance. What is disputed is the kind of commitment the member states undertake to spend their 2% of their GDP, 2% of their budgets on defense. You have heard about these allegations of Trump against Germany that we do too little. And yes, we might do too little, but we already agree in principle to this goal, 2% of the budget on defense. But it's not so easy. You can't just spend money for weapons when you can't buy them, you can't use them. That's a development. And what we do in Germany, we increase our expenditure for defense within 10 years by 80%. That's almost doubling, which will be 2024. Then we have 80% more on defense spending than 2014. And one has to state, more and faster expenditure would simply not be doable at this time frame. We accept and we stand by the 2% objective, but it will take much more time. There's another disagreement, that is Nord Stream 2. You know, the gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea connecting Russia with Germany, we would say connecting Russia with Europe. There's a political dispute about the political wisdom to build this. We had gas pipelines on the ground, cutting through Ukraine and Poland, and now there's already one gas pipeline on the ground of the Baltic Sea, and there's built another one. The US thinks that this gas pipeline makes Germany a hostage of Russia. That's the allegation by the White House. We think energy security is not defined by where the gas comes from, but whether it is replaceable. And yes, it is replaceable. If we couldn't get Russian gas anymore, there are a lot of gas pipelines in Europe, built since 2011, from north to south, from west to the east, and there are many other resources. Norwegian gas, even American gas, we already buy American gas, and this argument that Germany will be a hostage of the Russian autocrats, I think it's not really an argument we can follow in Germany. Finally, there is a disagreement on trade, in general and also in detail. The United States, or Washington, criticizes Europe's large trade surplus, and particularly the German surplus. Germany and the Europeans argue in the other direction. Yes, there is a surplus, a great surplus, when you look isolated to the goods which are traded between the United States and Europe, and the United States and Germany. But if you look at the services which are traded between the United States and Germany, then there is a big American surplus. All the web-based services coming from the United States to Germany are much more numbers than the other way around. All the big web companies, Google, Microsoft, etc., they are all based in the United States. And you have to see also these surpluses, and then the picture looks very different from the picture President Trump and Secretary Ross paint when they say there's a huge surplus of trade with the European Union, something like 300 million. You have to look at the whole picture. So, what do we do with these differences? The best way would be we find solutions, and we have to be in a dialogue, and maybe sometimes we even have to find compromises. Because it doesn't work when we cut down ties and everybody just does his or her or its own business. We are interconnected between our continents, between our countries in a way we cannot afford to build new boundaries. And maybe trade is the best example to show that. When we really cut these ties, we will harm each other and there will be no winner. In fact, Germany, for instance, or German products are by far not just produced in Germany. The best example is the famous German car, the BMW. The biggest BMW factory doesn't stand in Bavaria, but where is it? What do you think? Spartanburg in South Carolina. That's the biggest car manufacturing facility of BMW worldwide. All the SUVs of BMW might they drive through Beijing, Berlin, Munich, or Reading, Pennsylvania, are produced in the United States. Not by number, but by value, BMW is the biggest car exporter of the United States. And those are figures we have to take in mind when we talk about these economic ties between our countries. The second reason why we have to find solutions and have to stand together is this. We should not waste our energy in a confrontation between natural allies. We are natural allies for these values I talked about, but also for economic reasons. If you look around in the international geopolitical and strategic landscape, then we can see certain and threatening changes. There's a rise of China at a pace unprecedented in history. Not long from today, China's economy will be the largest in the world. On a global scale, we see China accumulating economic and political assets that it will use and is already using. China creates dependencies all over the world, and it will use it for its political national interests. Russia is returning as a military power, it's returning as a power which uses means of asymmetric cyber warfare, and will use this for geopolitical gains. And of course, even so, ISIS may have largely been beaten. There's the Islamist militancy which will remain a threat. Unfortunately, too many people in the world speak the violent, anti-Western and hate-filled language of extremism. So, we have to stand together in confronting these threats. We face in both continents, in both countries. We have to stand together to face a rising China jointly, to confront a revisionist, destructive Russia jointly, and to combat international terrorism jointly. Americans want their allies to be strong. Germans and Europeans want their allies to be strong. So targeting each other would only weaken us in this regard. And yes, even though there are disagreements between Washington and Berlin, there's a strong relationship between our countries and continents we can rely on, regardless of all the differences I just mentioned. And I tell my German friends and politicians who come here to look closer to this country and not just follow the news in Germany and Europe to build their own view on America. Of course, in Europe, we are informed about the tweets of the president, about the disagreements and the problems occurring all over. But we are not informed in the same way about all this interest I see in this country, in Germany. When I travel around, I see and experience a lot of empathy, a lot of interest, and I meet many friends of Germany, and that's great, and that's a relationship we can rely on. And we also have to look into the states and see the politicians, beside the politicians in Washington, who have own views of the relationship between our continents and countries. Yes, there is friendship, and there is a strong relationship between our countries. And let me conclude with the following remarks. First, no doubt, the United States of America remain our closest partner. In terms of foreign and security policies, at least outside of the European Union. There might be the time to readjust the transatlantic partnership, but not abolish it, but to adapt it to the changes in international politics. Secondly, Germans and Europeans have to take more responsibility, particularly in terms of European engagement in NATO. I talked about this. This is actually a long debate in Germany already. President Gauck triggered this discussion in Germany in 2014 at the Munich Security Conference, when he said we have to do more and faster and more. We have to work more for the international community. We have to work faster and more determined. And in this whole picture, the defense spending is only one part. Thirdly, we have to collaborate closer in political arenas where we share common interests with the United States. What I mentioned, that the policy against China, against Russia, and also against the Islamist militancy. Fourth, yes, we will express differences and counter positions clearly where we see that our central interests are in jeopardy. We will be willing to defend our European positions and interests, might it be the trade deficits or trade barricades like tariffs, or also our view on the Iran deal or others. Fifth, we are committed to expand engagement in international organizations, where the US has cut or ended in its engagement. It's not only the United Nations, but also the Climate Treaty and other treaties. The European Union, partners in Canada and Japan, we all are called to fill the gaps that opened. And we are called particularly since the appetite of Russia and China to change the international order is pretty big. And so we have to defend this multilateral order. And finally, we want to address the people of the United States, people like you, with a dialogue initiative. We want to invest more in the broad fundamentals of the transatlantic value-based partnership. And one of these initiatives is this so-called Deutschlandjahr in the USA, the German year of friendship in the United States under the motto, Wunderbar together. Yes, indeed. If we stay together, that would be wunderbar. And in this way, I'm very happy that this luncheon today is also a part of this new initiative, to stand together, to look at each other, to speak with each other, and to be in a lively dialogue about what our lives make special in the countries where we live. Thank you so much for being here this noon, and I really appreciate your interest and your commitment.
Council General Gill has agreed to take some questions from the audience, and we have maybe about 15 minutes we can devote to this. Two questions that are related here from two different persons who handed me the question cards. Your opinion about the future of German politics in lieu of the Green Party and the far-right gains in the last election, and to some degree the rise of anti-Semitism of late in Germany and maybe elsewhere in Europe. And maybe relating specifically to the Green Party, and this question also says the naturalistic right in a recent EU Parliament election. So the political situation in Germany right now and in Europe.
Yes, I didn't mention this at all because I talked about the transatlantic relationship, but of course, German politics and European politics also influence the transatlantic relationship. You might be aware of that we had the European election last Sunday. And let's start, I'm always an optimist, and that's why let's start with the positive things. First of all, the participation rate went up very, very much in the European elections in the whole European Union. So this means people are interested in politics more than they were years ago, and they are interested in the European issues. Maybe in this way, the whole discussion about Brexit helped to make people aware that there is some value in this European Union, which is an economic value, but also a political value. So this is very positive. The second positive thing, particularly in Germany, the right-wing populists didn't gain the votes which was expected or we were afraid of. In Germany, actually, the right-wing populist party, the so-called Alternative for Germany, which is now also a member, has a faction in the federal parliament for the first time since 2017. They lost votes compared to the election for the federal parliament, which is a good sign that populist views, right-wing populist views, anti-European policy doesn't gain a majority or even a big share in the votes. On the European level, they didn't gain that much votes, but there are differences within the countries. We have Hungary or Poland, where the right-wing populists are very successful. We have the Netherlands, where the right-wing populists lost many votes. So that is very diverse. But in general, we don't have a majority or even a bigger share of right-wing populist parties in the European Parliament than before. About 25% of the European Parliament votes went to right-wing populist parties. So that's the European level. In Germany, indeed, we faced 2 years ago, during the last federal election, a new development that this right-wing populist party gained national interest and a certain share of votes. 13% of the Germans voted for the right-wing populists. And now for the first time since the Second World War, there's a faction in the parliament which is populist right-wing party, which is for Germany a new experience, not for Europe, but for Germany. And there are differences in the country. In the region where I come from the very southeast in Saxony, the former East Germany, the share of the right-wing populists is much higher than in the western states. That has several reasons. First of all, 40 years of dictatorship changed the societal fabric dramatically. So there were no parties in this country. There was one party which ruled the country. The churches, which are very important, or religious organizations, but churches, of course, in Germany, which are very important for the societal fabric, were fought against. And in the end, only 20% of the people in East Germany belonged to the churches, because you paid a high price. Lynn told my biography. I'm very happy in retrospect that I'm a trained plumber, but this was not really voluntarily, because my father was a Protestant minister. It was very clear me and my 6 siblings wouldn't be allowed to go to a high school, because if you were engaged with the church, it was very clear you were not in favor for the communist dictatorship. So you were considered as an opposition, and when you are in opposition to this government, it was clear this government won't give you a higher education. That's how it worked. So I became a plumber. I would become, if the wall wouldn't have come down, I would be now a Moravian minister. Wouldn't be so bad either, but after the wall came down, everything changed. So the church, the role of the church as an important part of the societal fabric diminished over the 40 years and didn't gain the power again which it had before. All these organizations in towns and of citizens were not tolerated by the communists. So everything had to be rebuilt, and so you don't have a strong network of political organizations, parties, etc., who could work with the people in this region in East Germany. And then, of course, after the wall came down, there was a very hard time for many people, because in Germany all the economy was not at all compatible to the rest of the world. So hundreds of thousands, millions of East Germans lost their jobs, and many of them didn't get into the workforce anymore. So there was, disappointment with the new freedom. Yes, they enjoyed political freedom, but they were not part of the societal life again. So there's some frustration, etc. And when right-wing or populist parties can deal with something very well, that is frustration. Feed frustration and offer easy answers. They never will work, but people follow these populists very often. So this is one of the explanations why the right-wing populists in East Germany gained so many votes. However, the democracy in Germany is strong. We see some new reshuffling of the party landscape. The big parties, the CDU, Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats, don't have the strength anymore they had in the past. The Greens stepped in. Green Party is the second strongest party now in Germany, with 20% of the votes, particularly within the young voters, because they address topics younger people really are fond of. They are interested in climate change and also economic issues. So we see a new development, and the role of the parties changed. But in general, I have to say, I'm very convinced that democracy in Germany is pretty strong. You asked about anti-Semitism. Yes, we can see a rise of anti-Semitism in Europe as well, unfortunately, as in the United States. This is not a new development, but maybe we look closer, also in Europe, what's going on. There's, if you want, there are two kinds of anti-Semitism. There's this anti-Semitism of these neo-Nazis and the right-wing populists, this old traditional neo-Nazism, and there is an anti-Semitism also brought into Germany by migrants and refugees who come from cultures where anti-Semitism is part of the culture. And that's a challenge for the German society to deal with this. That's a challenge for our schools, for societal dialogue, and we will work on this.
Okay, we have a number of more questions, but our time is running short, so we have maybe 6-7 minutes. But wir haben eine Hochschulstudent mit einer Frage.
Ja, Twin Valley. Meine Frage war mit dem Flüchtlingsproblem, dass das nicht mehr so ein großes Thema ist. Glauben Sie, dass die AfD, dass die Beliebtheit der AfD noch viel zunehmen wird oder dass das nicht mehr passieren wird? Danke.
Can we translate?
Should I translate it?
Please.
It was the question about the migration issue, if this is still a rising and still a big issue in the discussion, and how this will influence the strength of the AfD, the right-wing party. So, of course, to start with the latter one, the AfD, the AfD was founded in the early 2010s as a party anti-European or anti-Euro. It was basically a party of economists who questioned the European currency, the euro. But it shifted dramatically in the years later, particularly when Germany opened its borders to about 1 million of refugees, mainly from the Middle East, from Syria and other countries, Iraq, etc. And so they worked with the fears of the people, and they worked with the argument, particularly in the East, what I talked about, that the refugees now will get the resources which should better go to the eastern part of Germany. So they were pretty successful with this argument, but this obviously diminishes. And yes, we don't talk about the refugees as much as we did 4 years ago. There might be many reasons. You can't just talk about one topic all the time, but there's also another reason. A big part of this problem is well taken care of. Refugees, or only a few of them still live in huge facilities. Many of them found or were given apartments, etc. There is a big initiative by the government, but also by the businesses to provide. Those are mostly young people, not students, but not student age, but young people, to provide them with education, to school them, to take them in apprenticeships, to offer them an opportunity to take their own lives in their hands. And that's a big initiative, and a lot of effort goes into this. There are refugees also going back, not in the big numbers, but that's also the hope and expectation that they might go back when when the war and the civil war will be over. But this is the future. Yes, I wouldn't say shapes our society, but definitely our society has to cope with this issue, but I think a lot of things and initiatives are very successful already.
Okay, we really are just about out of time, but
I have time.
Good. Well, yeah, and for everyone here, this morning, Consul General Gill met in Morgantown at the Behringer Saw Company, which is German-owned, and Lynn Brown and I were privileged to be there with him, and he's Christian, who is here. We're going to be meeting this afternoon with Brenntag over in Leesport, German-owned company, and we're going to be spending some time immediately after this at the Why Missing Foundation with County Commissioner Scott and with Pam Schupp with the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance to discuss our own local economy. So, we'll be doing that, but we really do have we have so many students in the audience today. This is a fair question coming from, it's a pointed question, I think, from my friend Dan Fogarty, who is very much involved in workforce development here, of course, but with his work. So the question would be this, can you give some comment on the internship component, the way in Germany, several of the last years of formal education often integrated immediately with business over a period of time. We're gaining some of that traction here in Berks County with that at the senior last high school of your level. And it would be interesting to hear if you could just comment briefly how that system works in Germany.
So we call it the dual education, the apprenticeship for a classic trade, basically. That's what I did, even in East Germany. We have a long tradition. When you learn a trade, it might be a plumber, an auto mechanic, or a hairdresser. There is a real apprenticeship, 2 or 3 years. And it's a great combination between learning the practical skills and having a theoretical education. So when I learned the trade of plumber, 1 week I went to the workshop of my headmaster. It was a very small plumbing shop. And the other week I went to school. And I learned drawing, I had chemical and physics, learning everything about the material we use, how welding really functions, all these theoretical things. And this combination is a very successful concept because you have really well-educated and broadly skilled experts in their trade. And that's what we also want to support here in the United States as German Foreign Ministry, together with our chambers of commerce. There's a Chamber of Commerce, American-German Chamber of Commerce in New York. Just last week I went to carpenter shop in Jersey City, where they launched a new program of dual education, really after the German model, for wood engineers, learning in this carpenter shop the practical skills, and then they partner with a community college where they will be taught theoretically. And we also, or the chamber also launches a program in another county in New Jersey to develop also a program for, I think, auto mechanics in this case. And there will be more of these programs in New Jersey. We have a governor who is very fond of this because he knows this from his own experiences. Not that he is trained in the trade, but he lived in Germany many years. Phil Murphy was not only a Goldman Sachs banker in Frankfurt in the 90s, but he was from 2009 to 2013 the American ambassador to Germany, lived in Berlin, and he was at this time very interested in exactly this system of practical professional education, and now he wants to implement this in New Jersey as well.
Thank you.